If Jesus said that we ought to keep this golden rule, this principle of treating others as we would have them treat us, I wonder why it is that sometimes we so often fail at that. I don't know about you. I know as I look at my own behavior, it's pretty easy for me to miss the mark on that one. I wonder sometimes if it's just a lack of thoughtfulness about my own behavior, my own way of living. Probably at times it's my own self-centeredness. I'm focused more on what I want out of a situation and not so much love-focused at what someone else needs out of a circumstance. Maybe at times it's just a blatant disregard for what Jesus wanted. I don't want to do what he wanted because it doesn't feel good, or maybe it's just the rebellious heart in me. I often find in a situation like this that it's easy to see it in other people, much easier to see it in other people than it is to see it in my own life. But I think it would be helpful if before I interacted with people, I always checked what it was that I was going to do with that question. Is this truly what I would want them to do for me? Is this the way I would want to be treated? Because all too often, I'll see somebody, sometimes folks even here at church, who will respond in a very impatient or angry or even mean-spirited kind of way towards someone else, but then complain when someone does it to them. It's easy for me to see that in others. It's a lot tougher to look in the mirror and to see it in myself. But if I'm going to live life like Jesus called me to live, then I'm going to have to be willing to see it in my own heart. And I'm going to have to start to think of my own behavior in that way. I'm going to have to start to check my behavior before I do it, to think to myself each time I approach someone, is this really the way that I'd want to be treated? Is this the way I would want them to respond to me? It's easy to think about some of these things when we're sitting here in a setting like this. Easy to imagine that we would do the right thing or the good thing, because these circumstances don't seem hard, but there are times when our decision finds itself in a very difficult spot. That happened for an Army medic named Stephen Chitterer back in 2005. He was deployed with his unit patrolling the streets of Baghdad, Iraq, and he found himself in the crosshairs of a sniper who shot him. The papers like to say that he met his enemy's bullet before he actually met his enemy. You see, Chitterer's bullet didn't kill him. He was wearing a bulletproof vest. It knocked him down, but he was fine. His life was saved, and he got back up and went on with the rest of his Army patrol, and believe it or not, they actually tracked down the sniper who had shot him. Chitterer found out from others in his patrol that his assailant was now wounded and was in prompt need of medical attention, which put Chitterer in a difficult spot. What would he do as a medic? He was now faced with a choice. How would he respond when moments ago this sniper had Chitterer in the crosshairs of his rifle, pulled the trigger, fully intending to take Chitterer's life? And now, this man's life hung in the balance, and Chitterer would be the one who could save it. What would he do? Some of us, if we had been in his shoes, might have roughed up the man who had tried to kill us. Others of us might have walked away, easily justifying the fact that the man deserved what he was getting, for he had just tried to kill us. But what would Chitterer do when faced with that decision? The newspapers tell the story. He treated and he dressed his assailant's wounds, and in doing so lived out a pretty vivid illustration of what it means for you and me to live as Jesus has called us to live, to treat someone as we would have them do for us, not necessarily the manner in which they deserved. We'll be faced with similar decisions this week. Granted, the circumstances may not be quite so vivid and intense as they were for Stephen Chitterer. But Jesus said our decisions, what we decide to do in those circumstances, even if they're not that vivid, still are a pretty big deal if we're serious about living life as Jesus lived it, about living life as Jesus has called us to live. When faced with those circumstances, what will you do? The consequences may be bigger than you think.